Okay. Well, that would have been a good time to have the sound off.
It was.
Oh, well, there we go. Okay. Huh. Well, I think we need to take a moment and let's just pray. God, thank you for songs. Thank you that you have given us your creation, a little bit of you, that we can be creative, that we can be melodious, that we can be harmonious, that we can sing and use our voices that flow from who we are to flow to who you are, to worship you. And I thank you that you've given us the chance to do that. God, we want to keep worshiping you, and we worship you not only through singing, but we worship you through your word and knowing you. And so I pray, God, that you would lead us through your word this morning, that you would enlighten the eyes of our hearts, that we might know you better. I ask it and I pray it in your name, Jesus. Amen. Well, a couple of weeks ago, I was doing some shopping. I was doing some shopping for some Christmas gifts for Val and the girls. And so there I was at the hardware store. I know. There I was at the hardware store going up and down the aisles thinking of all the great possibilities I could give them for Christmas. I mean, obviously, it would be great to get Val a belt sander because, hey, we can always use a belt sander. And Jacelyn probably could use a reciprocating saw because who couldn't use a reciprocating saw? And all the great time I could have with some other power tools that I'd get Carissa. Well, no, I actually did not do any shopping for them at the hardware store for Christmas. So don't worry, Jacelyn, you're not getting a reciprocating saw. Which she might use against me, actually. But I was at the hardware store. I was at the hardware store a couple of weeks ago buying a few things that I needed for the house. And I went to the register to pay. And as that transaction was taking place, I said, well, Merry Christmas to you. And the person behind the till looked at me and said, well, it really doesn't feel like Christmas. And that, of course, started the discussion of COVID and all of that kind of thing. And as I left the store and I got in the truck, I began to think on my way home. I thought, what is she saying when she said it really doesn't feel like Christmas? It just doesn't feel like Christmas. What does it mean for Christmas to feel, for it to feel like Christmas? What does that mean? What does it take? What are the elements that it takes? What is it all about when we say, I've got that Christmas feeling? It doesn't feel like Christmas. What was she really saying? Because we've said that too. I've heard that from many people. Well, it just doesn't feel like Christmas this year. It's just not the same. It took me back to some memories. It took me back to some childhood memories as I thought about Christmas and the feeling of Christmas. I remember when I was in elementary school and we would go to Grandma's house for Christmas. Grandma lived about 15 to 20 minutes away from us, depending on how quick we got out of the house and into the car and traffic lights and all that kind of thing. But I remember Dad would go out first and he'd go to the garage and he'd start up the truck or the car and he would back it out into the driveway. And we would put on our winter coats and our winter boots and our toques and our scarves and our mittens, and we'd be all bundled up because often in those days Christmas was minus 20, minus 30 degrees up in Edmonton. And we would troop out to the garage and we would get in the car. And I was always thankful that the car was in the garage because the garage was a little warmer than outside. But even when we sat down on the seats, you knew that it was cold outside. And I often thought to myself, how does this make sense that I put on a winter coat, I put on boots for my feet, I put a hat for my toque for my head, I put on mittens for my these things, hands, but we don't actually put anything on our seat, and you sit down in the cold car. Well, anyway, it was okay because we knew we were going to Grandma's house. We knew that the little bit of cold and the little bit of that wasn't a big problem because we were going to Grandma's house. And so in the car we were, and we'd go that 15, 20 minutes to Grandma's house. And it was usually pretty dark or getting dark, depending on what time of the day we went. It was usually late afternoon. And the Christmas lights on the lamp posts and everything were already illuminated, and there was garland and all of that kind of stuff. And you drove along the streets, and you knew it was Christmas. And you drove, and many of the houses had Christmas lights on. And they were flashing at you or just blinking at you or whatever. And you would drive along and you knew it was Christmas because of all the Christmas lights everywhere. And you'd finally get to Grandma's house just about the time the car was a comfortable temperature. And you pulled into the driveway at Grandma's house, and we all got out and we walked to the back door, and you bounded up the 3 steps onto the porch, and Grandma opened the door, and Grandma was always happy to see you. You were always welcome at Grandma's house, right? And we'd go in, and it started to smell like Christmas already. The turkey was cooking, the potatoes, whatever else they had. And we as kids, we would go, and we'd go through the kitchen. We'd go through the dining room and into the living room. And the living room was where Grandma had her tree, her Christmas tree. It was often a small little tree that was placed upon a little bit of a coffee table type thing. But we went and checked out the tree. Well, not the tree, we checked out the presents. Because always under the tree were presents, and we'd look for our names and all of that kind of thing. And we'd spend the time there as more people came, and they began to, work on the food and do all of that kind of thing. And people came, and there was conversation, and there was laughter, and there was always a little bit of, Mom and Dad demanding that we settle down, or whatever the case might have been. And so people would come. Aunt Addie, Uncle Elf, they would come, and they would bring their dog Cindy, who we weren't supposed to give Cindy any turkey from the table. But it was Christmas, and what could we do? We were kids in elementary school, and Cindy looked so cute, so we gave her some turkey. And I'm sure we weren't as sneaky as we thought we were. But at any rate, it was Christmas. And more people would come. Elaine and Elmer would come. And sometimes others would come. Now I'm drawing a blank. Well, anyway, we'd have others come. Bert and Buddy would come, and their son Dana would come. Sometimes even a former teacher of mine, Doug, would come. And as people came, the pile of coats and boots and hats and toques and mittens grew. And they would always be stacked either on the rocking chair or to the side in a pile beside the rocking chair. And soon it was time to eat. And as people began talking and laughing and interacting, the moisture in the air in that little house would rise, and the windows would get the frost all over them, and on the edges of the window would be the ice that would form. And I remember as a boy, I would pick some of that ice off, and we would pop that ice in our mouth to cool us off. Or sometimes we'd just take the ice and we'd put it on our foreheads, and we would cool off. And then the trays would start coming out. We would have the mounds of mashed potatoes, the trays of turkey, and all these dishes of delectables that would be put onto the table that was always too small for everybody who was there. Which was a good thing for us kids because we didn't have to sit at the table. We got our own place to sit. And in our own place to sit, we didn't necessarily have to follow the rules of normal etiquette when you sit at a table, which really helped us to eat a little quicker so we could go back for seconds, a little faster than normal. That was a good thing. And so we all ate. And after we all ate and everybody was full, and somebody would decide that it was time to clear the table. And so the dishes would be stacked and the food would be taken into the kitchen and the dishes would be washed and dried and things would be put away. And all the time there was conversation and there was laughter and there was ordering kids around and all that kind of thing. And then after that, there was often music. There would often be a time of music where Uncle Alf would break out the accordion and he would start playing on that accordion. And he would play his tunes on the accordion, and he would give time for Elmer to play his tunes, and he would give time for my dad to play his tunes, or tune. As kids, we really weren't sure how many tunes my dad knew, because it kind of all sounded the same, kind of like da 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 da. That was his song. He played that all the time. You knew Dad was playing an accordion when you heard that song. Well, and sometimes there was a piano there, and sometimes the piano would be put into use. And after the music, that wonderful musical interlude, it was time to open presents. Opening presents was the highlight as kids, as elementary kids. And we would gather around, and everybody would gather around. We couldn't all fit in the living room around the tree. Many were in the dining room and whatnot. And the way we did that was we would hand out presents one at a time. So one person would get their present, and they would open that up. And we would all watch as they opened their present. And you would all ooh and ah about the wonderful gift they got and the thought that went into that gift. And I remember as an elementary school kid watching, because always without fail, the older ladies would always open their presents so slowly. They would make sure they would peel off that Scotch tape so it wouldn't rip any of the wrapping, so they could use it next year. And it took forever, at least as I was watching in elementary school, it took forever to watch them slowly unwrap their gifts so they could keep the paper for next year. I still think that's excruciating to watch, by the way. We as kids must have looked like Flash Gordon compared to everybody else, because we didn't unwrap presents, we ripped them open. There was no thought of saving paper. Why would you save the paper? I mean, who cares about the paper? I want what's in it. And we'd rip those open. And then when everybody was done, we all had our gifts, conversation would start again. And laughter would start again. And the day wasn't done yet. The evening wasn't over yet. Because now it was game time. There was always a good cribbage game going on. And then when we got games, we would open up those games that we got as kids and we would set them up and we'd learn the rules and we'd play those games. And again, there was laughter, there was conversation, there was ordering of kids. And then there were the chocolates and the cookies and the baking and the goodies. I mean, that was amazing. That all came out and was placed on the table or wherever you could find space for it. And we could eat almost as much as we wanted of that because nobody was really paying too much attention to how many chocolates we were having or cookies we were having or baking we were having. Because that was Christmas. And then finally the evening began to wind down. I don't know how late it was. I wasn't really into too much time, but somebody would decide it was time to go home. And so we would get on our winter coats and our boots and our hats and our gloves and our scarves, and Dad would go out and start the car and he would begin to warm it up, and we would say our goodbyes and we'd troop out to the car and we'd sit down on that seat, which was now not in the garage. And at minus 30, those seats in the car are very cold. And you knew it. There were no seat warmers in those days. The only seat warmer I remember in those days is when we did something bad at home and we had to wait for Dad to come home. And then we had a warm seat. Those were seat warmers. And then we made our way back home. And again, the Christmas lights through all of the street lights. And we got out of the car and we went to the door and we went into the house, and we were all grateful to go to bed because we were tired. But it was a wonderful tired. It was a marvelous tired. It was Christmas. That's one of my stories of Christmas. I'm sure you all have those stories. Those stories that really kind of tug at your heart, don't they? That's the problem I'm having. But we all have those wonderful stories of Christmas. And we call that the feeling of Christmas. That's what Christmas feels like, right? And so I was thinking about that when the person behind the counter said it doesn't feel like Christmas. I wondered what she meant. What did I mean when I went through this story? When I thought about what was I thinking about? What made Christmas Christmas? What gave us that Christmas feeling? Because when you think about it, every Christmas is different. My elementary year's Christmases were different than my junior high year Christmases, which were different than high school Christmases, which were different than university college day Christmases, which were different when we became adults and we were on our own. And then Christmas was different again when we had children. And when the girls were small, it was different than when they were older. And it's different now when they're grown. What makes Christmas what gives us that Christmas feeling? Because if Christmas feeling means I have to be in elementary school to go through all that I did again, I will never have that Christmas feeling. I just can't get it back. I can't have Christmas 20 years ago, 30 years ago, 40 years ago, 50 years ago. I will never get those back. I can't even reproduce last year's Christmas. Because I've changed. And the world has changed. And my family has changed. So what is the Christmas feeling? What are we saying when it doesn't feel like Christmas? Is it about the food? Christmas is Christmas because of the food and the mashed potatoes and the turkey and the gravy and the stuffing. And is that what we're saying? Is Christmas about the fun? About the presents, about the games, about the music, about the laughter? Is that the Christmas feeling? Is the Christmas feeling, is it family? To have family there, is that Christmas feeling? Because if all of those are what gives us the Christmas feeling, I will never again have the same Christmas feeling that I had 40 years ago. Or 30 years ago. Or 20 years ago. Or 10 years ago. So that can't possibly be the Christmas feeling. It is that which makes Christmas Christmas, the lights, the Christmas tree, the presents. What is it? What's that Christmas feeling? And has COVID really taken that away? I mean, that's what this person behind the counter was saying, was it can't be Christmas because we have COVID in the world. That is so very wrong. That is so very untrue. Because I wonder if you ask Mary and Joseph what Christmas is, what would they say? Turn with me to Luke. Luke chapter 2. I want to read just a brief bit for you. Luke chapter 2, verses 1 through 7. Now I know that Mary and Joseph weren't celebrating Christmas because there was no such thing yet. But we base our Christmas on these stories. Christmas began with this. So I think we can learn something about Christmas. through Luke chapter 2, verses 1 through 7. In those days, Caesar Augustus issued a decree that a census should be taken of the entire Roman world. This was the first census that took place while Quirinius was governor of Syria. And everyone went to their own town to register. So Joseph also went up from the town of Nazareth in Galilee to Judea to Bethlehem to the town of David, because he belonged to the house and line of David. He went there to register with Mary, who was pledged to be married with him, or to him, and was expecting a child. While they were there, the time came for the baby to be born, and she gave birth to her firstborn, a son. She wrapped him in cloths and placed him in a manger, because there was no guest room available for them. If we were to talk to Mary and Joseph and say, tell us about what we call Christmas, what would they say? What would it mean to them? What would their feeling be for Christmas? Because as I read the story, I see that Mary and Joseph, they took a journey that they were unwilling to take. They had to go to Bethlehem. They didn't want to go to Bethlehem. They didn't say, hey, this is great. We're getting a surprise trip to Bethlehem. How about that? What a great Christmas vacation. Mary is 9 months pregnant. Mary has to go on a long, cold journey, being uncomfortable. And they didn't have grandma to meet them at the door. We can go on long, uncomfortable journeys when we know there's someone who loves us at the other end to meet us at the door. But they had no such person. They just had a long, cold, uncomfortable journey, being 9 months pregnant. It's not a journey they wanted to take. They were unwilling to take this journey. Would you be willing to take this journey? Of course not. They were going on a journey that they were unwilling to take. Going to a place in which they were unwelcome. They were not welcome in Bethlehem. There was no place for them. Nobody opened the door and said welcome. Nobody was expecting them. Nobody was welcoming them. Nobody made reservations ahead of time. Nobody said, yep, hey, I've got this place for you. Don't worry about it. Just come. Call us when you get here. We'll let you in the gate. They were unwelcome. Nobody wanted them there. No, sorry, we don't have room. Sorry, it's all booked. Sorry, I'm not going to share this space with you. Sorry, I don't have room physically, and I don't have room in my heart for you either. It wasn't a place of hospitality. Hospitality means giving people room in your heart, not just in your house. And they refused to give them room in their house because they had no room for them in their heart. So they went on this journey they were unwilling to go on, to a place they were unwelcomed, to do something that was unknown to them. Mary was giving birth. Mary had never given birth before. This was her first son, her first child. She had not gone through the birthing process yet. She may have watched it as a young girl with the family, but she had never experienced this. This was unknown to her. And she was going without mom, and she was going without grandma, and she was going without relatives, and she was going without friends, and she was going without a midwife. She was alone. And Joseph, this was unknown to Joseph. Joseph had never given birth to anybody. Joseph had never helped to give birth. Joseph had never seen giving birth. Joseph didn't know what he was doing. So they go on this journey they're unwilling to take to a place they're unwelcomed at to do something that's unknown to them. They didn't know the people there. They didn't know how to give birth. They didn't know what was going to happen. It was unknown. And they were unprepared. They weren't prepared for this. They could have been prepared for this if they were allowed to stay home in Galilee, but they had to journey, and they were unprepared. They didn't have a baby shower. They didn't bring with them a crib and snuggly clothes and onesies and all that kind of stuff. They didn't have formula. They didn't have all of the baby stuff you need to properly take care of a baby, as we would say. They had none of that. They wrapped baby Jesus in strips of cloth. I wonder if those strips of cloth didn't come from Joseph's robe. We need something. He's got to stay warm. What do we do here? Use my robe. Use this. They took a journey they were unwilling to take, to a place they were unwelcomed at, to do things that were unknown to them, for which they were unprepared for. That was Christmas. There were no lights. There was no food. There were no feasts. There was no laughter. There was no music. There were no gifts. There wasn't even any family. I don't know why there wasn't any family. Because Joseph had to go to Nazareth to register. Joseph was of the line of David. Were there no other people from Joseph's family who went? Was Joseph the only person from his family who went to Bethlehem? What about his brothers? What about those in his family? Surely he would have had family members who had to go to Bethlehem as well. Where were they? They weren't there. No aunts and uncles came through the door. No cousins came through the door. Nobody welcomed them. Nobody said, hey, Joseph, Mary, we're your cousins. We can make room in our hotel room for you. Nobody. They were alone. They were unwelcomed. They were unprepared. They were unwelcome. They were unwilling. Not unwilling in a bad way. They went, but they didn't want to. So where's the Christmas feeling here? What are we saying when we say it doesn't feel like Christmas? What are we saying that it takes to make it feel like Christmas? It seems to me we're confusing. We're confusing what Christmas is with the festivities of Christmas. It seems to me that we've made Christmas part of something that it isn't. You know the answer to the question, what makes Christmas Christmas? You know that. When I say, so what is the Christmas feeling? You know the answer. You knew the answer when I first said it. But we often don't live it. We often don't believe it. At least fully. That's why we find ourselves saying, and we hear other people saying, oh, this doesn't feel like Christmas this year. It's sure going to be different. Man, COVID has really ruined our Christmas. No, it has not. COVID has not ruined your Christmas. COVID has not taken away Christmas. It never can, it never will. Oh, it might take away some of the things that we think we need to have to make Christmas feel like Christmas. But you know what? You can have all of this in any other celebration of the year. You can have family, you can have food, you can have friends, you can have lights, you can have gifts, you can have all of this fun and laughter and games. You can have it at New Year's Eve. You can have it at July 4th. You can have it at Halloween. You can have it at birthday parties. You can have it at anniversaries. You can have it at weddings. You can have it at just any old time of the day and the year. But you can't have Christmas any other time. Because what makes Christmas Christmas is the only thing that Mary and Joseph had. That's Jesus. The only thing Mary and Joseph had that was light and good and a blessing for their first Christmas was Jesus. Christmas is about Christ. The name means the Mass of Christ, the celebration of Christ, Christ Mass. It's not food Mass. It's not friend Mass. It's not light Mass. It's not gift Mass. It's not laughter Mass. It's not even friend or family Mass. It's Christ Mass. I get what we're saying when we say, man, it doesn't feel like Christmas. I get that. I was planning to be up in Canada for Christmas this year with my family. I haven't been up to Edmonton for Christmas in, I think, 5 years. It's time. This year was time. But I'm not missing Christmas. I'm missing family. But my family is not what makes it Christmas. Because it's not family miss. It's Christ Mass. It's all about Jesus. See, this Christmas you might feel unwelcome. You might feel unwilling. I'm not really willing to do Christmas this year. I don't really feel like it. It's unknown. I've never done Christmas without this or without that or without him or her. And you're unprepared. I'm just not prepared this year for Christmas. Haven't taken the time, don't have the money, whatever. But maybe all of these things are what point us to the real feeling of Christmas. And that's Jesus. Maybe being unwilling and unwelcome and unknown and unprepared is what really causes us to draw closer to the one who counts. And that's Jesus. Because Jesus is the center of Christmas. Jesus is the Christ of Christmas. We will have Christmas this year. Because the feeling of Christmas is Jesus. Knowing his love. Knowing his grace. Knowing his forgiveness. Knowing his presence. And being content with Christ. Even without the food, without the feasts, without the families, without the presents, without all of that, we can be content knowing that this Christmas we have Christ. And that's who we celebrate. So no matter what you don't have this year that you had last year, you have Jesus. I would love to recreate those Christmases of my childhood memory. They're wonderful. But I do not confuse them with the reality that Christmas is simply Christ. I can do all that other stuff any old time of the year. I can go see my family in summer, Lord willing, and I can have the food and the fun and the games, and I can do all of that. I have Christ. You have Christ. Yes, it is different, but it's always different. Every year is different from the next. This year, may you have a Merry Christmas. Not because of what you don't have, but because of who you do have. Amen. You pray that you enjoy this Christmas, that you do get to know who Jesus is, and that that all the other stuff we get to see through to Jesus. Join me as we close in prayer. Jesus, we both celebrate and we grieve. God, Christmas really brings to the forefront a lot of feelings in us. A lot of things we've grown up with or learned or expected or remember, and so it can be hard. But help us, Jesus, to help us to focus on you and to take our comfort, to take our joy, to take our celebration from you. Because you're Christ, and we celebrate you. So Jesus, this Christmas, I pray that you would show up in ways unexpected. That you would show up in ways that we haven't seen you before because we've been looking at other things. Jesus, may you focus our eyes upon you. And may we have a wonderful Christmas. And may it feel like it because of you and you alone. In your name I ask and I pray it. Amen. And again, have a Merry Christmas. God bless.